After the incident at the police station, news began to spread quickly. Judge Tanya Williams, a respected black judge, had been stopped by a white police officer who accused her of stealing the car she was driving. The story shocked many people, because it was hard to believe that someone with such a high position could be treated this way. But it was even more upsetting for those who understood how often people, especially black people, face similar or worse treatment from law enforcement. As the story reached the media, reporters contacted Tanya's office, asking for details. She decided to speak openly about what had happened. She wanted people to know the truth, not just about her experience, but about the bigger problem of racial profiling and injustice in policing. When Tanya appeared in interviews, she spoke calmly but firmly. She described how the officer had stopped her without reason, accused her without proof, and treated her disrespectfully despite her identity and position. Her words struck a chord with many viewers and readers. People began to talk about the incident on social media. Some expressed outrage and sympathy. Others shared their own stories of unfair treatment by police. The conversation quickly grew beyond just one event. It became part of a larger discussion about race, power, and justice in America. At the police department, the pressure increased. The public demanded answers and accountability. Officials launched an internal investigation to understand what went wrong. Officer Ryan McClellan, the young white officer who had made the stop, was placed on administrative leave while the department reviewed the case. This meant he was temporarily removed from active duty until the investigation was complete. Some members of the community supported Ryan, saying he was just doing his job and acting on information he had received. Others were critical, arguing that he had acted carelessly and shown bias. The debate was intense and emotional, reflecting the deep divisions and tensions in society. For Tanya, this attention was both empowering and exhausting. She was used to being strong and composed, but now she was in the spotlight for something painful. Still, she believed that speaking out was important. She met with community leaders, attended events, and gave speeches about the need for reform in the justice system. She wanted to make sure that her experience was not forgotten or dismissed. Meanwhile, the police department faced growing calls from activists and public officials to change their policies. Many people wanted better training for officers on how to avoid racial bias and how to respect the rights and dignity of everyone they encounter. There were demands for more transparency and accountability, so that mistakes like this would not happen again. The incident also sparked protests. People gathered in streets, holding signs that said things like, "Justice for all," and "Stop racial profiling." They marched peacefully, calling on leaders to listen and to act. Tanya joined some of these events, standing alongside members of her community, showing that even a judge was not immune to injustice. In the background, the investigation into Ryan McClellan's actions continued. It revealed that he had made other questionable stops and arrests in the past. Some of his behavior suggested a pattern of rushing to judgment without fully checking facts or listening to people's explanations. The department's leadership realized that they needed to address not just this one incident, but also the broader culture within the force. After careful review, Ryan was formally reprimanded and then dismissed from the police department. The decision was met with mixed reactions. Some thought it was fair and necessary, while others believed he was being unfairly punished for doing his job. For Tanya, the outcome brought some relief, but no full closure. The experience had been a painful reminder of the challenges Black people face, even those who hold power and respect. But it also strengthened her commitment to fighting for justice and equality. She used her platform to push for changes in the law and police training. She worked with lawmakers and community organizations to promote better understanding and fairness in the justice system. This chapter of Tanya's life was difficult, but it became a turning point. Her courage to speak out inspired others to share their stories and demand change. The protests, media coverage, and political attention helped bring the issue of racial profiling into the national conversation. Even after the initial outrage faded, the ripple effects continued. New policies were introduced in many places to prevent similar incidents. Training programs on implicit bias became more common. Police departments started to review their procedures and relationships with the communities they serve. Tanya knew that one case couldn't solve everything, but she believed that her experience could be a step toward a fairer and more just society. Her story showed that no one should be above the law, but also that no one should be unfairly targeted because of the color of their skin. The incident was a reminder to the world that justice must be blind, not just in theory, but in everyday life. It was a call to listen more carefully, to question assumptions, and to treat everyone with dignity and respect. Through all the challenges and the attention, Tanya remained determined. She continued her work as a judge, but now with a deeper understanding of the struggles many people face. She carried with her the hope that one day, the system she served would truly serve everyone equally. This part of the story was about more than just one mistake or one officer's actions. It was about a community's response, a country's reckoning with its past, and the ongoing fight for justice and equality. It showed how one person's courage could spark a movement and remind us all why fairness and respect matters so much in the law. Judge Tanya Williams had just finished a long day at court. It had been a tiring day with back-to-back cases. Some were simple, others were emotionally difficult. She had spent hours listening to people's problems, making decisions, and trying to ensure fairness. Now, as the sun began to set, she was ready to go home, relax, and have a quiet evening. She stepped out of the courthouse, walking calmly to the parking lot. Her car, a dark blue luxury sedan, was parked where she always left it. Tanya was a woman who followed the rules. She was careful, respectful, and proud of the work she did. As a black woman who had worked hard to become a judge, she had faced many challenges in life, but she believed in justice and in the law. She got into her car, started the engine, and began to drive home. The streets were not too busy. Soft music played on the radio as she thought about her schedule for the next day. The air outside was cool, and the sky had turned orange and pink with the sunset. Tanya wasn't in a rush, just peacefully driving through a neighborhood she knew well. Then, suddenly, she noticed flashing blue and red lights in her rearview mirror. A police car was behind her, its siren now faintly wailing. Tanya was surprised. She hadn't been speeding or broken any traffic laws. Still, she knew the routine. She turned on her signal and pulled over to the side of the road. She waited quietly, keeping her hands on the steering wheel like she had taught her own children to do if ever stopped by police. Her heart beat a little faster, not out of fear, but frustration. Even as a judge, she knew what it meant to be a black person pulled over by the police. These moments could turn bad very quickly. After a minute, the officer walked toward her car. He was a young white man, maybe in his early 30s. His face was stern, and his hand rested close to the gun on his hip. He didn't greet her. He didn't even ask for her license. His first words were, "Step out of the vehicle, ma'am." Tanya was surprised. She looked at him calmly and said, "Officer, may I ask what this is about?" The officer didn't answer directly. Instead, he said, "This vehicle matches the description of a car that was reported stolen earlier today. I need you to exit the car immediately." Tanya blinked. Was he serious? This was her car. It was registered in her name. She had the papers. She even had her judicial badge in her purse. She opened her mouth to explain, but the officer cut her off again. "I said step out of the vehicle," he repeated, louder this time. Tanya felt a wave of disbelief rush over her. She had dealt with all kinds of people in her courtroom, criminals, liars, victims, but she never thought she'd be treated like a suspect on the street. Still, she didn't want the situation to escalate. She knew how easily things could go wrong, especially for someone who looked like her. Slowly and carefully, she unbuckled her seatbelt and stepped out. The officer quickly moved behind her, took her hands, and handcuffed her. The cold steel on her wrists shocked her. She couldn't believe it was happening. Neighbors stood at a distance, watching. Some took out their phones. Tanya kept her head high, trying not to let the humiliation show. She tried to speak again. "Officer, I am Judge Tanya Williams. This is my car. I have identification and documents inside." He didn't respond. He seemed convinced that she had stolen the vehicle. He radioed in some information and guided her to the back of his patrol car. No one listened to her. No one checked the documents she had in her glove box. No one believed she could be who she said she was. Inside the police car, Tanya stared ahead, trying to stay calm. Her mind raced. Was this really happening? Was all her hard work, law school, her years as a public defender, and then finally becoming a judge, worth nothing at this moment? The drive to the station felt like it lasted forever. When they arrived, she was taken out of the car and made to sit in a waiting area while the officer ran her name. Another officer, older and clearly more experienced, walked by and paused. When he saw her, he looked at her closely. "Judge Williams?" he asked with confusion. "Yes," she said firmly. "That's me." The older officer's face changed instantly. Embarrassment, surprise, and concern crossed it all at once. He asked her to wait, and disappeared into the back. A few minutes later, the same young officer who had arrested her was pulled aside. They spoke quietly, but Tanya could see the tension in their body language. Soon after, the older officer returned and apologized, saying there had been a mistake. Her car had not been reported stolen. There had been no valid reason for the stop. The officer tried to remove the handcuffs quickly and awkwardly apologized, but the damage was already done. Tanya stood quietly. She didn't shout. She didn't cry. She simply looked at them and said, "I hope you treat everyone with this much urgency, not just those who look like me." That night, as she drove home again, this time in silence, she felt something shift inside her. Something had cracked, and she wasn't sure it could be fixed. She had always believed that the justice system could be fair, but now she had felt the fear, shame, and helplessness that so many people had described in her courtroom. And the worst part? She had done nothing wrong. Officer Ryan McClellan had been on patrol for most of his shift. He was a white police officer in his late 20s, still relatively new to the force but confident in his role. He took his job seriously, believing that he was there to protect the community and keep people safe. However, sometimes that confidence made him act quickly, without fully thinking through the situation. That evening, Ryan had received a radio alert about a stolen car reported nearby. The vehicle description sounded familiar to him. A dark blue sedan, like the one he had seen parked several times in the neighborhood. He was eager to catch the suspect, hoping to prove himself as an effective officer. When he spotted a car, matching the description, driving slowly along a quiet street, he decided to pull it over. Ryan switched on his patrol car's flashing lights and sirens. The driver, a woman, immediately pulled over. Ryan approached the vehicle quickly but carefully, his hand close to his holster. He was alert, ready for anything. As he looked at the driver, he noticed she was a black woman dressed in professional clothing. It was late, and he was tired, but he was determined to do his job properly. Without greeting her or introducing himself, Ryan ordered, "Step out of the vehicle, ma'am." His tone was firm and direct, showing no room for discussion. The woman looked surprised but didn't resist. She asked politely, "Officer, may I ask why you stopped me?" But Ryan didn't answer. Instead, he repeated, "Step out of the vehicle now." The woman, Tanya Williams, carefully unbuckled her seatbelt and stepped out. Ryan's eyes narrowed as he studied her. She seemed calm and collected, which made him suspicious. "This car matches the description of a stolen vehicle reported earlier today," he said. You're under investigation for theft. Tanya tried to explain calmly. Officer, this is my car. I am Judge Tanya Williams. She reached inside the car for her purse, pulling out a judicial badge. I'm a judge, and I have all the documents you need. Ryan barely glanced at the badge. In his mind, he thought it might be fake or that she was trying to avoid trouble. He wasn't willing to accept her word so easily. He believed that if she had stolen the car, she would try to use any excuse to get out of being arrested. Without waiting for further explanation, Ryan moved behind her, grabbing her hands firmly and putting handcuffs on her wrists. Tanya's shock was clear, but she didn't struggle. She knew that resisting could make things worse. Other people on the street had stopped to watch. Some were quietly filming on their phones. The scene was tense, and Ryan felt pressure to maintain control. While escorting her to the patrol car, Ryan spoke into his radio. Suspect in custody. Vehicle matches stolen report. He repeated the claim to justify his actions. He didn't realize that the situation was more complicated than he thought. Tanya, handcuffed and calm, asked again, "Please check my documents. You'll see I own this car." Ryan ignored her request. He was focused on following procedure as he had been trained, but his judgment was clouded by suspicion and unconscious bias. In his mind, she fit the profile of someone who might steal a car even though there was no real proof. Inside the patrol car, Tanya sat quietly, feeling both confused and humiliated. She wondered how an officer could mistake her for a criminal without even trying to understand. Meanwhile, Ryan was processing the situation as a routine arrest, but he could sense the growing tension around him. He knew that stopping a professional woman like her could cause backlash if things didn't go right. At the police station, the tension increased. Tanya was placed in a waiting area while Ryan went to complete paperwork. An experienced officer passing by recognized her instantly and stopped, surprised to see a judge in custody. He asked, "Is this really Judge Williams?" "Yes," Tanya confirmed quietly but firmly. The senior officer's face showed concern. He immediately contacted someone in charge. When the paperwork was reviewed carefully, it became clear that the vehicle wasn't stolen, and the original report was either mistaken or had a wrong license plate number. Ryan was pulled aside and questioned about why he had arrested Tanya without properly checking the facts. It was obvious that he had acted too fast and based his judgment on assumptions. He admitted that he had been under pressure and thought she matched a description, but he hadn't verified the details fully. Tanya was brought back from the waiting room. The cuffs were removed, but the damage to her dignity had already been done. She was calm but clearly upset. She told the officers, "This kind of mistake shouldn't happen to anyone, especially someone who represents justice." The incident left everyone involved unsettled. Ryan realized that his eagerness to catch a suspect had clouded his judgment, and Tanya experienced firsthand how quickly respect and rights could be ignored based on appearance alone. The confrontation was more than just a traffic stop. It was a moment exposing deeper issues in law enforcement and society. As Tanya left the station, she felt the weight of what had happened. The officer's refusal to listen or check her story reminded her of the many people she had seen in her courtroom who were unfairly treated. She wondered how many others had faced the same or worse situations without the protection of a badge or position. For Ryan, the event was a harsh lesson about bias and responsibility. It was a moment that would make him rethink how he approached his work in the future. For Tanya, it was a painful reminder that even those who uphold the law are not always treated fairly by it. This confrontation would become a turning point for both of them, setting the stage for a difficult conversation about race, power, and justice. When Judge Tanya Williams was taken to the police station, the atmosphere was tense and confusing. She was still trying to process what had happened on the roadside, the sudden and humiliating stop, the officer's refusal to listen, and the handcuffs biting into her wrists. Despite her calm exterior, inside she was filled with frustration and disbelief. How could something like this happen to her, someone who had devoted her life to upholding the law? At the station, Tanya was led to a small waiting area, a cold and sterile room filled with uncomfortable chairs and harsh fluorescent lights. She sat quietly, hands still sore from the handcuffs. Around her, officers moved quickly, focused on their tasks, unaware or perhaps indifferent to the extraordinary situation unfolding. Tanya hoped that soon someone would check the facts, verify her identity, and correct this terrible mistake. Meanwhile, Officer Ryan McClellan was busy at the desk, filling out forms and entering information into the computer system. He was certain that he had done the right thing. After all, he had acted on a report of a stolen car, and the vehicle Tanya was driving matched the description. From his point of view, he had no reason to believe otherwise. But deep down, a small doubt began to creep in, especially after Tanya had shown him her badge and documents. Just then, a senior officer walked into the room where Tanya was waiting. His steps slowed when he recognized her. "Judge Williams?" he asked, surprise and confusion mixed in his voice. Tanya nodded, keeping her expression steady. The senior officer quickly went to speak with Ryan and other colleagues, and a quiet investigation began. The senior officer reviewed the stolen car report carefully. It turned out that the description was vague, and the license plate number reported was not an exact match. Someone had made a mistake when filing the report. The dark blue sedan Tanya was driving was not stolen at all. It was registered in her name with all the proper paperwork in order. The officers realized that a terrible error had occurred. Tanya was not a criminal. She was a respected judge, someone who commanded respect and trust in the community. The mistake was serious, and the way it had been handled was even worse. Ryan was called aside by his supervisor. The conversation was firm but professional. He was asked why he had arrested Tanya without properly checking her identification or confirming the details. Ryan explained that he had relied on the alert and the vehicle description, and that he had been under pressure to act quickly. But he also admitted that he hadn't looked carefully at the documents Tanya had offered. Back in the waiting area, Tanya was brought out, and the handcuffs were removed. The relief was immediate, but it was mixed with a deep sense of hurt. She looked at the officers and said quietly but clearly, "This situation should never have happened. I hope the department learns from this." Despite the apology from the senior officer, Tanya could not shake the feeling that this incident was about more than just a mistake. It was a moment that exposed the deeper issues of racial profiling and bias in law enforcement. Tanya had been judged not by her character or her position, but by the color of her skin and the assumptions that came with it. She thought about how many others, without her badge or title, might have been treated worse in similar situations. She thought about the countless people who had no voice or platform to speak up after such an injustice. That night, Tanya sat in her living room, replaying the events over and over. The confrontation had shaken her, but it had also strengthened her resolve. She decided that she would not remain silent. If this could happen to a judge, then the system was broken and needed change. At the same time, Ryan began to reflect on his actions. He understood that his quick judgment and lack of careful verification had caused harm. He realized that being an officer was about more than just following orders or reports. It was about seeing people as individuals and respecting their rights. This part of the story is not just about a mistake or a misunderstanding. It is about the moment when truth was revealed, and when both sides, the judge and the officer, were forced to confront uncomfortable realities about justice, fairness, and bias. The experience stayed with Tanya and Ryan, shaping their views and actions going forward. It became a powerful example of why change was necessary in policing, and why listening and respect must come before assumptions and force. The day's events would ripple out, eventually reaching the public and sparking discussions about race, power, and the law. But for now, in the quiet of the police station, it was a moment of truth for everyone involved. A moment when a judge was mistaken for a criminal, and the system that was supposed to protect justice showed its cracks. After the public uproar and the official investigation into the incident where Judge Tanya Williams was wrongfully stopped and handcuffed, life slowly began to settle, but not without lasting effects. Tanya's experience became more than a personal ordeal. It became a symbol of a larger problem in the justice system and law enforcement. People everywhere were paying attention, asking tough questions about fairness, bias, and respect for human rights. Judge Tanya Williams returned to her courtroom with a new sense of purpose. She knew that her work as a judge was important, but now she felt a deeper responsibility. Her own encounter with the police had shown her that justice isn't always fair or equal. Some people, because of their skin color or background, faced suspicion and discrimination every day. Tanya wanted to use her position to fight for changes that could prevent such incidents from happening again. In the courtroom, she became more vocal about issues of racial bias and the need for reform. She carefully listened to cases involving police misconduct and discrimination, often reminding those present about the importance of fairness and equal treatment under the law. Her rulings reflected a balance of firmness and compassion, and she earned even greater respect for standing up not just for the law, but for justice in its truest sense. Outside the courtroom, Tanya worked with community leaders and organizations dedicated to improving police-community relations. She attended town hall meetings, participated in panels, and helped create educational programs to teach people about their rights and how to interact with law enforcement safely. Tanya believed that knowledge was power, and that understanding could break down fear and suspicion on both sides. The police department also faced pressure to improve. Following the investigation, they introduced new policies aimed at reducing racial profiling. Officers were required to undergo training on implicit bias, learning how unconscious prejudices can affect their decisions. There was more emphasis on communication and de-escalation tactics to prevent confrontations from escalating unnecessarily. The department also set up better systems for accountability, so complaints about officers would be taken seriously and investigated thoroughly. Ryan McClellan, the officer who had stopped Tanya, faced consequences. He lost his job, which was a clear message that careless or biased behavior would not be tolerated. But beyond his punishment, Ryan also took time to reflect. In interviews after the incident, he admitted that he had acted too quickly and that he hadn't fully understood the impact of his actions. He expressed regret and spoke about the need for officers to treat every person with respect and dignity. The story of Judge Tanya Williams inspired many people, especially young Black women and men who saw in her both the challenges and the strength needed to confront injustice. Tanya became a role model, someone who faced unfair treatment head-on and used her experience to push for change. Her case also helped bring attention to the wider issue of racial profiling in America. Other cities and states examined their own policies and practices. Activists continued to raise awareness and demand reforms. The conversation that Tanya's incident sparked was not easy, but it was necessary. In her personal life, Tanya found support from family and friends who stood by her through the difficult times. They reminded her of her worth and strength. Tanya also sought comfort in quiet moments, reading, spending time outdoors, and reflecting on how far she had come. Despite the pain of what happened, she refused to let it define her. Years later, Tanya's story remained a powerful lesson. It showed how even those in positions of power could be vulnerable to bias, and how important it is to keep fighting for fairness and respect in every part of society. The changes that came from her experience were slow and ongoing, but they were real. Tanya's experience was a reminder that justice is more than laws written on paper. It is about how people are treated every day, whether they are judges, officers, or ordinary citizens. It is about seeing each other's humanity and ensuring that no one is judged unfairly because of the color of their skin. The story ended not with anger or defeat, but with hope and determination. Tanya Williams continued her work, her voice stronger than ever, inspiring change and reminding everyone that true justice must be fair, equal, and respectful to all. Her journey showed that even in the darkest moments, courage and truth could shine through, lighting the way toward a better, more just future for everyone.